Hey, Clint.
How are you? Oh, it's loud.
It's nice to be in New Orleans, I tell you that. That's nice. Thank you all for coming out.
Indeed.
I know Lauren Hill is here, so you had a choice.
There you go. I think y'all made the right choice. Well, we're going to hop right into it. I'm thrilled beyond anything I can express to be here with a sort of like literary hero of mine. I had the opportunity to have dinner with Nikki yesterday evening, and I saw her, and I told her that maybe 7 years ago I had seen her read at Dillard, and I took like a very nervous fanboy picture with her, and was trying to find it so that I could do a sort of like before and after where I'm like a lot more cool, but I'm really not that much more cool. Um, but it's really truly an honor, and especially to come and talk about another literary hero of mine, James Baldwin, and a model for so many of us. And I had the esteemed pleasure of being able to read their conversation. There's a dialogue that they had in 1971 in London, where Nikki was 28 years old, and was having a conversation with James Baldwin when he was much older than 28. But it's really special for me because I'm 28. And so I was like, oh man, everything's coming full circle. So I was like, it was written in the stars. But we're gonna start by I think I felt like it made the most sense to begin an event with Nikki Giovanni by having her read some of her work, and then I'll read a poem or two from my book as well, and then we'll have a conversation, and then obviously give you all time to ask questions at the end.
Okay. I'm gonna walk over to the. Yeah, okay. Should I keep this? I don't know if you can see this. And he's a friend, and I've been amazed that. Well, God, the older I get, the crazier it is for me to make sentences that make sense. NASA, let me start with something, then when I take up too much time, tell me. NASA needed a favor, and they called me. They needed a favor that a poet could do. And they called my office, they called Jenny, and said, we need Dr. Giovanni to do yakety yak. And my answer to NASA is always going to be yes, because I'm a space freak. And so I did it. And then a couple of weeks or maybe a month later, we got a note from Charles's person, if I can say that I have a person. His people contacted my people, and they said, Dr. Giovanni hasn't sent us an invoice. And so my person said to me, Jenny, said to me, Nick, we haven't sent an invoice. What should we charge NASA? And it was like, that's the truth. And it was like, you have got to be kidding. I was glad I was sitting down, because my idea of what to charge NASA is Dr. Baldwin. I said, I want Dr. Baldwin. I want lunch with Dr. Baldwin. And so she wrote back and said, what we're charging is lunch with Dr. Baldwin. He said, that's great. I want my people to meet her people. My people are only 3 people, so that was easy to do. But he has a lot of people, so getting that together. But finally, we were able to get together, and we went to D.C. and had lunch, and we met. It's really, really nice. I wanted, and nobody listens to me, and I'm not in a bad mood today, but I wanted Barack Obama to nominate Charles Bolden for the Supreme Court. Because we need somebody who has been off this earth to know what this earth should be. That's the truth. And as you know, he didn't listen to me, but, well, he didn't, and he should have, because one, Bolden's IQ has to be 190. He's been around the world 4 times. He's a brilliant man. And 2, since they weren't going to let him have who he wanted anyway, nominate somebody that everybody else has to think about. So I've been a little disappointed in a lot of things about Barack, but that's one of them. But it has nothing to do with why we're here today. It has nothing to do with that. I am am glad to be here in New Orleans, because this is one of our major cities, and the sad thing that happened today was that Mr. Fitzgerald got shot and killed. And road rage is a terrible thing. So if somebody cuts you off, just smile and go on about your business, because everybody's a little upset right now. And as well, you may be, that fucking, that excuse me, that little that Nazi that got elected. I don't think he got elected. I think he stole the election. But nonetheless, we're going to be stuck with Trump for a while. My guess is that he's going to get impeached because he's greedy and crazy. But I lost money on the Republicans anyway. I had $50 that said they were going to elect Bush, and they did. They were nominating Bush, and they didn't. And I would probably lose another $50 on Trump being impeached. But it's just $50. You can. I mean, even at my age, I could stand on the corner and make $50. So. He's going to ask me about that, I'm sure. You got to have some level of faith in some of these things. If they're filming this, and I'm sure they are, they're going to get Clinton, like cut this out, cut this out, cut this out. But I was trying to say, I knew Clinton was going to ask me to read a poem, and I have several poems. I've gotten to, that's always dangerous when she takes her glasses off. My latest book is called A Good Cry. And it won't be out until next October. And I hope that I do get to come back to New Orleans. It's called A Good Cry because people think women cry all the time. And if you look at the movies and stuff, you see the women are always crying. Something happened, the women are always crying. And it's not true. Things happen, and we get it done. And my mother died. That's true. My mother died, and it's now been 10 years. But my mother died on the 24th of June. My sister died on the 10th of August. My aunt died on the 29th of October. And my dog died on the 10th of December. And I had to go, I didn't cry. And what I've had, of course, ultimately has been a seizure. And my doctor and I, and thank God he is good looking, Gregory is good looking, so I don't mind arguing. No, you just can't argue with an ugly doctor. You can't. But we're arguing about how I got the seizure. And he says I had high blood pressure. And I'm saying, Gregory, I don't know a black person on earth who doesn't have high blood pressure. No, the minute you go, wah, and they say you're born and you realize you're colored, the next thing is that your blood pressure goes up. You know that's the truth. I think I have the seizure because I kept everything in so that I could get done what I had done. And I think in the next probably 50 years, there'll be a disease called the Nikki. And everybody's, what's wrong with you? Oh, I had the Nikki. And it's going to be just a seizure because you're holding things in. So I wrote a book called A Good Cry so that somebody needs to tell us it's okay to cry. Because no matter what happens to you, people say, oh, don't cry, it'll be all right. But two things are wrong with that. You should cry, and it won't be all right. Whatever it is, it's going to hurt, and it's going to continue to hurt. And we need to learn to say to each other, you can cry. It's perfectly all right. And of course, men don't get to cry at all. It's bad enough for women, but men don't get to cry at all, which is why they shoot each other going up and down the street, which has nothing to do with this poem. So I was trying to decide which poem to write, to share with us, to open up our thing. And of course, I'm a big fan of black women. I just am. And gosh, I mean, I can see creating the earth. I can understand things like that. That makes sense. You sitting around your God, you're sitting up there, I got nothing to do. I think I'll make another planet. And people are, what you gonna make, God? I think I'll make Earth. And you can't get nothing out of that. And they're probably right. If you're sitting there talking to God, it's a joke. And so you make this ball and you throw it out there. And then you put these people on it. And you know that you have to evolve them. And right now we don't look very good for evolution, but hopefully we will continue to do better. And it makes sense. But I thought if I was God and evolving and I was making something, what would be the main thing I would have to make? It would have to be the black woman. And it's true. The one reason I dislike that movie, and you probably saw it, called The Martian. And they sent a white man up to Mars, you remember? And he got stuck up there, and then he pooed a little bit, and then he ended up with potatoes or something, and he grew some food. And that's the truth. But you know damn well, if we had sent a white man up to a planet, that the first thing he would do is shoot something. He would look for something to kill. We know white. I mean, it's not even personal. You know damn well that's what he would have done. If we want to send somebody to Mars, we have to send a black woman because she's the only person that would go up to Mars, kind of look around and, baby, who's here? And whoever answered her, she would find a way one way or the other, to either love or get along with, however you want to look at it. However, and I know that because we watched her be transported against her will from Africa to America. Not a problem. Ooh. There we go. We're just discussing the black woman. And we, no, we watched her be transported from Africa to America. Now, there's nothing in Middle Passage that would make sense. Everybody in this room, pretty much, except those people just walked in, those kids, are old enough to remember Middle Passage. And when we came through Middle Passage, you remember that the first thing that happened, we're on the boat, we're on the ship, and we could look out. They would have to bring you up because if they don't bring you up and they don't throw some water on you, you're going to get dirty, you're going to die. So they bring you up, they throw water on you, and they have to make you move because if you don't jump up and down, your muscles are going to be not good. So you're doing that. But the second day or so that they bring you up, you can look back and you can see the earth. So you can say to yourself, because slavery has been going on a long time, you know that this is going to happen. That's okay, we'll get off this and it'll be all right. On that fifth or sixth day, they bring you up, they throw the water on you, they knock you around a little bit, you jump up and down, and you don't see the land anymore, but you can see the clouds. And you can look at the clouds and you can know, okay, clouds above land are different from clouds over sea, so you know where you are. Now, we all know that on that 10th day, which is where I want to bring us to, on that 10th day, when they bring the captured up, they look around and they don't know anything. So we all know that the 10th day is going to be the day that they are going to totally resist. Every white man and every white woman on the ships, bringing them here, are going to be armed because they know that these people are now going to know that they don't know where they are and they have to resist now. That makes sense? So we know that on that 10th day, as they do resist, we know that they're not going to be successful. We know that many are going to be thrown overboard. We know that many are going to be killed. We know this. We know that they're going to be put back down under. Now, this is what we do know that nobody wants to give it credit. We know that somebody had to recognize we've been defeated. And that somebody is going to be that black woman, that grandmother, that old woman that somebody would laugh about, why are you buying her? But she's there. And she recognizes that her people need something. And because we forget that there is no such thing as an African language, there is language of the African peoples. There's the Ghanaians speak a language, the Sierra Leoneans speak, they all are different languages. There's no such thing as African language. And so we know that she doesn't necessarily have a language that is going to be common to the people on the ship with her. So she's going to do the one thing that America has done for the world, and that's to bring a beautiful music, and she's going to go, and somebody is going to pick up that hum and that moan, and we're going to bring that to the United States. And it won the United States in, but as we get here, the only way she has of communicating with her people and with the white people who brought her over here is going to be through that moan, and they're going to sell her. So the first song that black people knew, the first word that black people knew was sold, because that's what they kept hearing, sold, sold, sold. And they were sent out into communities, and they built a community, and it's the black woman who built a community. She had a direction with her people. She ended up being pregnant, sometimes against her will with the white master, sometimes because she wanted to with the black guy, but she ended up having something in her. And what was in her was going to be born. And when it was born, she was going to do the one thing that has made black women the most incredible women on earth. She was going to love it. And in loving it, she was going to give it a name, and she was going to give it a hope. And she was going to remind it that whatever these people are, you're wonderful and you're beautiful. The black woman is incredible. And so we know if we're going to go to Mars, we know if we send the black woman up there, she's going to do the same thing to baby who's here. And against her will or not, something is going to come and mate with her. Something is going to be inside of her. Something is going to grow inside of her. And no matter what it is, we know that when it comes out, she's going to name it and she's going to love it. And we know that we cannot look at space without looking at the obligation we have to send Black women into space so that they can find the life and the love that is up there and share it. I wrote a poem quite a while ago. It's called Ego Tripping, because if you were going to create a world, you were definitely going to find a Black woman and you were going to let her create all the rest of it, because that's what we do. I was born in the Congo. I walked to the Fertile Crescent and built the Sphinx. I designed a pyramid so tough that a star that only glows every 100 years falls into the center, given a divine, perfect light. I am bad. I sat on the throne drinking nectar with Allah. I got hot and sent an ice age to Europe to cool my thirst. My oldest daughter is Nefertiti. The tears from my birth pains created the Nile. I am a beautiful woman. I gazed on the forest and burned out the Sahara Desert. With a packet of goat's meat and a change of clothes, I crossed it in 3 hours. I am a gazelle, so swift, you can't catch me. For a birthday present when he was 3, I gave my son Hannibal an elephant. He gave me Rome for Mother's Day. My strength flows ever on. My son Noah built Newark, and I stood proudly at the helm as we sailed on a soft summer day. I turned myself into myself and was Jesus. Men intone my loving name. All praises, all praises. I am the one who would save. I sowed diamonds in my backyard. My bowels delivered uranium. The filings from my fingernails are semi-precious jewels. On a trip north, I caught a cold and blew my nose, giving oil to the Arab world. I am so hip, even my errors are correct. I sailed west to reach east and had to round off the earth as I went. The hair from my head thinned and gold was laid across 3 continents. I am so perfect, so divine, so ethereal, so surreal, I cannot be comprehended except by my permission. I mean, I can fly like a bird in the sky.
So, one of the best things that can happen in the world is to read a poem after Nikki Giovanni. And one of the worst things that can happen in the world is to read a poem after Nikki Giovanni. So I'm just going to read one poem from my book. So this is my first collection of poems, just released about 2 months ago, and it is largely wrestling with what I call like the sort of the marathon of cognitive dissonance that it is to grow up as a young Black person in this country, and how does one wrestle with that sort of ever-present tension of growing up in a home and in a community in which you are affirmed and loved and celebrated, and then going out into a world in which you are constantly rendered a caricature of fear, in which you are followed, in which you are, in which people fear you before they even understand who you are. And so it is thinking about lineage, hence the title, Counting Descent, in both a macro and micro level context. So what does it mean for me to be an American, to be from Louisiana, to be from New Orleans? But on a micro level, what does it mean to be my grandfather's grandson, my mother's son, my sister's brother, somebody's partner, somebody's teacher, somebody's friend? And so the book is wrestling with that sort of positionality. And this is the title poem of the book, and it's called Counting Descent. My grandfather is a quarter century older than his right to vote and 2 decades younger than the president who signed the paper that made it so. He married my grandmother when they were 4 years younger than I am now and were twice as sure about each other as I've ever been about most things. They had 6 children separated by 9 years, 3 cities, and 1 Mason-Dixon line. There were twice as many boys as girls, but half as many bedrooms as children, which most days didn't matter because poor ain't poor unless you name it so. And kids prefer playing to counting, so there was never much time to wallow in anything but laughter. My mother was the 3rd oldest, or the 4th youngest, depending on who you ask. She was born on a federal holiday, which my grandmother was thankful for. Said the good Lord only got 1 day off when he built the world, so 1 day is all she needed too. Mom says Pops was persistent. Wouldn't give up when he asked if he could take her down the street to get some coffee, which back then cost $2 less than it does now. Mom is trying to stop drinking coffee, but she still loves Pops. They've been married for 31 years and have 3 kids who are 6 years and 1,517 miles apart. My birth took 12 hours and 43 minutes, which is probably because my head is 5 times too big. Mom said my head was too big because I needed enough room to read all the books in the library, which seemed like infinity. even though I didn't really know what infinity meant, but I heard my teacher say it once when she talked about the universe, and books felt like the universe to me. I was pretty good at math too, until about fifth grade when they started putting numbers and letters together, which didn't make much sense. My brother is 70 months younger than me, but is taller and knows more about numbers, so it doesn't always feel like this is true. My sister is 24 years of loyal and 8 years of best friend. I'm the oldest of three, but maybe the most naive. I still believe that we can build this world into something new, some place where I can live past 25 and it's not a cause for celebration, because these days I celebrate every breath. Tried to start counting them so I wouldn't take each one for granted. I wish I could give my breath to the boys who've had theirs taken, but I've stopped counting because it feels like there are too many boys and not enough breath to go around. So we are here largely to celebrate and discuss a friend of yours, James Baldwin. I wish I could say that he was a friend of mine, but only in my dreams.
Jimmy was dead when you.
But by a year, by a year.
I was gonna say.
But sometimes I imagine that we would have been like kicking it at Starbucks, and it would have been great.
Knowing Jimmy, you would have been sitting in a bar.
Fair enough. But I'd love to hear more about what your relationship with Jimmy was like, and I think that thanks to the work of many different scholars and many different writers, Baldwin is in many ways experienced a sort of resurgence in sort of popular social and literary discourse. And we all sort of have our idea of who he is from The Fire Next Time, from Giovanni's Room, and much of his work. But I'm wondering if you could share who he was as a person.
Probably not, to be honest. The first time, because we all read Jimmy, I mean, there's no question. And Jimmy had a home, we were talking about it, we had dinner last night. We were talking about Jimmy had a home in St. Paul de Vence, and he had a big fireplace. It was tall. You know, Jimmy was short, and it was tall. And he had books all across that. And he was being interviewed by somebody. Right now, I can't, as I said, I had a small seizure, so I've forgotten a lot of things. And I forget who he was being interviewed by. But he had Spin a Soft Black Song, which was my first children's book, and it was out. And you could see it. And so I was looking at the interview, and all of a sudden I looked up, and it was like, that's my book. And I was just totally thrilled that Jimmy Baldwin would have my book. I knew Ellis Hazlett, and because we had finally, in my part of the black community, we were SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and I'm from Fisk University, so Diane Nash and John Lewis came from SNCC. And SNCC had grown, you know, and the Black Panthers. So there was a lot going on that finally people were saying, maybe we should listen to what the black people are saying. And so one of the people they called, PBS called, was Ellis Hazlett. Now, how Ellis and PBS got together, if I know, I don't remember. And if somebody else, I just don't. But Ellis, for some reason, called me to ask me if I would like to, you know, just sort of be a part of Soul, to be on Soul. And the answer to all of those things, the answer to any request I was talking about, but the answer is always yes. And so the answer to that was yes. And Jimmy had wanted Alvin Poussaint to be the host of Soul. And he had asked me about it. He'd come up to my apartment and asked me about it. And I liked Alvin. I knew Alvin. But I just didn't think Alvin was going to be a host, because Alvin was always trying to do what I'm saying to you, you shouldn't do. Alvin was always trying to please somebody else. He's a psychiatrist. So he's always trying to find out, you know, what it is that's going on. I thought you needed somebody in the show business to do it. And since Ellis was the person who loved the show business, I thought he should do it. And Alvin did the first 2 or 3 Souls, and they were terrible. And so he came back. They were. And he came back and he said, you know, it's not working, is it? I said, Ellis, nobody cares about this show as much as you do. I said the same thing to any of you who are writing out here. Nobody cares about what you're writing as much as you do. So the first person you have to please is you. And he asked, and so that was my answer. Why don't you do it? And so he decided, okay, I'm going to take over. He's a good dresser. I think the best dressed man on TV right now is, and I'm mad at him, but Family Feud guy, Steve Harvey. And, well, they cheat. Did you see that the other, well. No, that family had won four times. That 5th time, they should have won and taken that stupid Ford car. They should have gotten it, but that's another question. But I was mad about it. But Ellis was a well, that's the truth. But Ellis was a great dresser too, and Ellis was gay, and Ellis had a bit of a lisp, and so he was thinking it wouldn't work. But anything you love is going to work, and that's all I was trying to say, just as a friend. So we started sort of working together. He said, well, nobody will be on Soul. I said, everybody will be on Soul, because at that point, black people didn't have any TV to be on. And so everybody, you call and ask. And so we just started doing that, put this show together. We put the black women, speaking of black women, we put the black women together, Jackie Earle and all of them. We put that show together. So I helped him produce it wasn't like I was getting any producing credit, but I was saying, well, why don't you call and why don't you ask and why don't you? It's how I met Muhammad Ali, which would be another question too. But it was just really just sort of wonderful to keep putting these together. At the end of the year, it goes without saying, Ellis owed me. And so he said to me, I owe you. And I couldn't have agreed more. And I said, well, he said, what would you like? And I said, if I could have my way, I would like to talk to James Baldwin. I would be thrilled. And he said, I know Jimmy. And I was like, okay. And what do we need to do? He said, I'll call him and see what he has to say. So he called Jimmy, and Jimmy said, oh, I'd love to talk to Nikki, but I don't have time to come to the United States. And so Ellis came back to me and said, he doesn't have time to come to the United States. I said, hell, I go to, Moscow. I would have walked, to talk to Jimmy. And so it didn't, I said, wherever he will go will work for me. And so he said, he had friends, I didn't, in London. And he said, well, let's go to London because you had the television, you had everything in London. And I said, that's great. I had my son was a little boy then. So we all agreed to go to London. Victoria Lucas, who worked with B.B. King, it was B.B. King's publicist. And so Vicky was working with me at that time. And so Vicky and Tommy and I and Ellis, of course, we went to London. Jimmy came up and met us. Jimmy is a night owl. Jimmy was always, and I think anybody that knew him at all, he was a night owl. So Jimmy would be coming home. We stayed across from Princess Margaret's grounds. And so Jimmy's Brown Hotel. So Jimmy would be coming, I say home, Jimmy would be coming back to the hotel in the morning, 7 o'clock, something like that. Thomas, of course, in the interview had children. You know what I was, at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm having breakfast with the child. So Tommy, of course, and because everybody that I ever knew liked Jimmy, so Tommy would see Baldwin, and he'd say, Jimmy Baldwin, take me for a walk. And Baldwin's going like, Tommy, because he's hungover, I can't take you for a walk. But Tommy was like any other kid, take me for a walk. And so it finally became easier for Jimmy to take him for a walk than not. And so they would go and do the walk around and then Jimmy would go to bed because we filmed at night. And then when we finished filming, about 11 o'clock or so, Jimmy would go, I guess you call it gay catting. There was other words for it, but he would go out. And we would go to bed. And that's how I got to know him. And I had a friend of mine who was dating his brother, David. And so you got to know him, but I think we respected each other and I think we liked each other. But I think that both of us always left a lot of room. And I think even today, as I am sitting here, and you say, define yourself. If somebody said to me, if you said to me, define yourself, the first thing I would say is I'm not friendly. And basically, I'm not. I'm really not. And so I give everybody a lot of room. If there's something you want me to know, you have to tell me because I won't ask. And a lot of my close friends actually are upset because, well, you never ask about it. So I thought if you wanted me to know, you would have told me. And otherwise, it's none of my business. And so that's the kind of relationship I had actually with almost everybody, with the possible exception of Margaret Walker. And Margaret and I, I used to ask her, I would come down to Jackson. Margaret lived in Jackson. Margaret and I cooked together. And I think cooking together made a big difference. And Margaret was a good cook. And so it was very, for me, it was good. I would take Tommy, we'd go down, and Margaret and I would cook and talk. And so I would ask her things. But even Gwen, and I knew Gwen fairly well, I didn't ask Gwen her relationship, for example, with Dudley Randall, and I had a good idea of what it was because there's a reason people spend the night together. But there is, but it was none of my business, and so I just don't ask questions.
And so you mentioned something about so the first book that James Baldwin saw of yours, or that you knew he was reading of yours, was the children's book. And so you've written extensively young adult novels. You've written nonfiction. You've written poetry. James Baldwin, we know that like young people, that was something very important to him. I think of many of his essays, his essay to his nephew, A Talk to Teachers, where he talks about the importance of cultivating young people. And it's interesting, oftentimes when I go around, teachers and adults will say, especially in this sort of current political climate, they'll ask, how does one talk to a young person about race? How does one talk to a child about the way that white supremacy exists in our country? And as someone who obviously is thinking a lot about history in your work, and as someone who's also thinking about how we engage with and how we think about young people, how would you answer that question? In what way do you think is appropriate to talk to young people, young children, black or white, about race and the realities of race in our country?
Well, first of all, the reality, I'm teaching, writing for a young audience right now. I teach at Virginia Tech, and I really do love Tech. And go Hokies on Friday, on Saturday. We're playing Clemson, and I'm a little worried, but that's another discussion. I am teaching CJ, who was our slot receiver, so I'm hoping that he catch. Yeah, he's a good guy, you know. I think, and I'm telling my class that children are not stupid. So one of the things, there are two things that I think it's fair to say I hate. And one is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I think the most vicious thing in the world is to teach your child to sing that stupid fucking song. Excuse me if there's a child in here. It is the dumbest damn thing. Had a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw him, you know, why are we laughing at Rudolph? All of the other reindeers used to laugh and call him names. They wouldn't let poor Rudolph. What kind of sense in that? And then the minute that he did everything, the minute Santa comes and says, "Oh damn, I can't see my way through the fog." You see what I'm saying? Rudolph, will you help me out? And then all of the other reindeer love him, right? That's like this country when Joe Louis beat Max Strelling. Everybody loves Joe Louis. Oh, you must be very proud of Joe. I mean, you get sick of that. You really do. And I think that we have to remember that kids are not stupid. So we have to remember, the other thing, by the way, in case you are going to ask, that I hate is Clifford, the big red dog. And as you recall, Clifford ate the family out of house and home. Though the father had told the boy, Clifford was a runt. Now, for those of us who are grown in this room, we know that the runt of the litter dies. In that age, the runt is going to die. The boy fell in love with Clifford. He loved Clifford, and he wanted to take him home. His father let him, because that's what you do. You have a child, you have to let them love what they love. When Clifford died, because he was the runt, damn it, and he died, you have to explain to your child, we don't love things because they stay forever. We love because we love, and we keep them in our hearts. You explain it that way. You don't let it do it. And I don't like the term white supremacy, because whites are not supreme. That's just not the way. Thank you. It's just not the way it goes. What we have is this stupidity that says somehow or another to be in America is to be white, or as opposed to being black. But when we think about America, and I mean, not that we want to claim anybody, because damn it, we don't. But when you think about it, there's nobody in America who's white, because everybody here has screwed everybody. You're really out of luck if you can run, that thing they're doing on TV with find out who your ancestors are. All you have to do is look down the street. That's the truth. Save yourself some money. Everybody. No, everybody in America, and I don't know about Europe, but everybody in America is kin to everybody else, because we've been kin to each other for the longest. And to act like we're not. Have you ever noticed how it's mulatto now? That football player who's mad at the flag.
Kaepernick.
I love him. But I do. He's got a right to protest. But everybody's mad at him. But you know what they're saying about him? Because he's a mulatto. And he's a mulatto because he's a great football player. Because he's Rudolph. Because when he does something really well, you see what I'm saying? Everybody's talking about, oh, he's half white. You don't hear half white, half black. on our side, oh, they're half black, they're half white because their mother is or their father is. That's ridiculous. What we are is human. And we need to spend a little more time dealing with that humanity. And we need to spend a lot less time worrying about what kind of position are we in. Everybody, we were talking about that last night. Everybody wants to be, well, I'm a little bit Latin American. We're all a little bit something. We're all breathing air. We're all going to screw, if we're lucky, something. I recommend sex. I think sex is fun. And I do. When I was much younger, I came from a generation that screwed a lot. And I do. And I'm glad I recommend it because I do. No, at least we didn't grow up frustrated. We're happy. And I'm tired of, how come women have to be virgins and men have to be cockhounds? That's not making any sense. It's not. And Jimmy, we were talking about Jimmy. And Jimmy and his group, of course, are going to be gay. And everybody's upset about somebody being gay. And I don't think it's anybody's business. Who are you sleeping with? I think that what's important is that you enjoy it. And I think that what's doubly important is that when it's over, they understand that it's over. That's so basic, Oh, wasn't that fun? And now it's over. Yeah. So you don't have to be bothered with it. Well, if you leave me, I'm going to kill you. Well, you still can't screw me if I'm dead. Get over it. And we need to be taking those next steps in how we treat. Don't you think? And I think that men need to do a lot of growing up because I think it's a waste of a penis that men have one and they haven't figured out what to do with it and how to use it responsibly. Because women will screw, as you know, anything. So you just have to keep asking. If the one you've asked has said no, get another one, get another one, get another. Somebody's going to say yes. But the whole idea of rape, the whole idea of trying to control, it doesn't make any sense. And it's time we as a people, I don't mean America, it's time we moved on. It's time we found a way to be happy. I don't know what it is about America. I don't know what it is about people who are afraid of happiness. But happiness is important. And I'm 73, so I'm older than almost everybody in this room. But one of the things that we know is that you're not going to be here all that long. And when you get to be in the 70s like I am, you begin to say, oh, I wonder what else. I wonder how long and what else. And you're going to miss some things. You know that you're not going to be here. If I'm lucky, I've outlived everybody in the Giovanni family, by the way. The Giovannis all died before they were 70. And so I'm still here. So whatever it is I'm supposed to do, I hope I'm doing it, or maybe I hope I'm not doing it so I can stick around. I like being alive. It's a good idea. I do. I enjoy it. And I think that everybody else should. I think that what we have to learn to do is accept and embrace each other. And I think that takes practice. And I think that's what Jimmy was talking about.
And it was fascinating because you and Jimmy represented very different generations of the sort of black artists. And it was sort of talked about as this intergenerational conversation. And you came about in a very different era in the midst of sort of the black arts movement. Jimmy Baldwin was writing in the sort of pre and during the civil rights era. And it's interesting because I thought a lot about his essay, Everybody's Protest Novel, when I was writing my own book. And it's interesting, in Everybody's Protest Novel, for those who haven't read it, it was one of the first essays that James Baldwin put out into the world, and it's largely the one that got him as well known as he did. And so he's sort of inveighs against Richard Wright's Native Son and Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, and says that these aren't legitimate pieces of literature. Instead, these are means of sort of propaganda, and they render caricatures of the people who they are seeking to help. And said that they didn't, all the characters essentially, he said, were flat because they weren't like reflective of the complicated nature of what it means to be a human, and that we're not all white knights, or that we're not all caricatures of fear, but instead we are a little bit of both. But it's interesting because in the conversation you all had in this book, he said he would have written that essay a lot differently, 20 years from now than he did in 1954, I believe it was. And it's interesting because his relationship to the civil rights movement was fascinating because he was good friends with Martin Luther King. He was a part of the March on Washington, but they ended up not letting him speak, right? Because they thought that he was going to say crazy stuff. But I guess all that to say, I'm interested in what your relationship in your own work was, and how you situate yourself as an artist and as an activist, and if you see those things in tension, if you see those things as one in the same, as are they connected to the same sort of political or intellectual project, or do you disentangle them at all, or is simply each of them a part of how you navigate the world?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I knew that you'd ask something like that, and I did. Of course, I didn't know Richard Wright or Ellison, for example, and those two. And I think that Jimmy had some issues with them, which, again, as I said, I'm not curious, so I never asked. Uh, I never asked. I haven't reread the book, and
It's good. You
I
should.
don't know if I really thank you. If I really get like sick and know I'm going to die, one of those kind of things, I think I'll sit down and reread my work. But I know so little bit of my work, and I'm very lucky. I can read, for example, Ego Tripping, though I made a mistake. I heard myself make the mistake when I was reading, and I did make a mistake. And I have maybe 5 poems that I can read, and the rest of them I have to have the poem in front of me. And there are some stories that go to, and I like the stories because I'm a Tennessean by birth, and so I'm a storyteller. And I'm always talking, actually, and I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, Clint. I'm always talking to the writer in the audience. And so, and that's what I'm doing actually right now, because there's a story connected with what you're giving us, what we have, what Jimmy gave us, what Richard Wright, as you know, was enraged. Richard was always, but he's a Mississippian, and so if you're not enraged for Mississippi, where you're going to be enraged? But
Enraged at Baldwin's,
enraged,
or just generally?
You just grow up in Mississippi. You got to be mad all the time. You have to get it out, and so Native Son is going to do a lot of that. And I don't think that Richard Wright. As I said, I didn't know him, but I just can't see him being all right with it. But then I had the extreme pleasure of knowing Margaret Walker. And I should tell you the story. I know Margaret Walker because I used to spend a lot of time in Barbados because I like the Caribbean and I could do it. And I would take my son, and anytime we got tired of here, I lived in New York, we would fly down to Barbados, and it's a place we stay, and it was nice. And I was reading The Third Life of Grange Copeland. And I don't know if you all remember, it was a wonderful, wonderful novel. And we came back, that's when you had to change, so we flew from Barbados back into Atlanta. And I was in Atlanta, and I thought, oh, what the hell? Because, and I'm not friendly, but I thought, let me try it. And so I called Jackson, Mississippi, to see if there was a telephone for Alice Walker. And there was. And I got the phone number, and I called, and I said, hi, I'm Nikki Giovanni. I write poems. I'm always still surprised that people know me. She's like, yeah, no. And I said, my son and I are here in Atlanta, and we just wondered, I'd like to come meet you because I really love The Third Life of Grange Copeland, which is true. And she said she'd be delighted. So Tommy and I, instead of going home, went over. Tommy is the same age as her daughter. And so we went over and spent a couple of days with Alice. And so Alice said to me, have you ever met Margaret Walker? Well, everybody knew Jubilee, and everybody knew For My People. I come very close, For My People, so I can, and I was like, ah. And so she said, well, she's right around the street. Margaret Walker, and I'm looking at you now, Margaret lived, if I'm Margaret, you're Medgar Evers. And so that's the way Margaret lived from Medgar Evers. So we went over and I met Margaret. But meeting Margaret was like meeting my grandmother. And I have a thing about grandmothers, it was just, I just fell in love with her. I mean, she was just the most wonderful people. And her husband, all of them, they were just so lovely. And so actually we stayed closer than Alice and I did. But that's how I met Margaret. And then Margaret and I started going back and forth. Margaret had that was a long way to say, Margaret had such a different relationship with Mississippi than Richard Wright. And it wasn't that she wasn't afraid, because she was. And it wasn't that she wasn't angry, because she was. But she had that thing that I had heard in that slave ship. She had that, and she wasn't going to let it go. Richard Wright was going to get back, if I can say. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to get back. And Margaret wanted to say, we're embracing this in a different way. We are going to be all right. And I don't know if I'm properly. She knew that whatever it was, we were going to be all right. As I sit here disliking Donald Trump and those Nazis around him, I know that we are going to be all right. That's what we are. So that's how.
And speaking, so since we're on that topic, obviously we are in the midst of what is a very new political moment, and in some ways a much more explicit moment. And so, what do you think is the role of the artist in this moment, or is it any different than it's ever been?
I think the artist has always needed to be honest. And so, again, I'm speaking to the writers in the room. You have to use your own voice about what interests you, about what you care about. Because if you start saying, oh, I need to say, then what you're going to do is just be some kind of caricature, and you don't. And there's some history coming that's going to be really interesting. One of the people we keep forgetting is E.D. Nixon. And E.D. Nixon, of course, was the head of NAACP in Montgomery, Alabama. And, of course, Rosa Parks was his assistant. And we know that actually E.D. should have been in the position that Martin was in. But everybody liked Martin because Martin was a better speaker. There's no question about that. And Martin was able to organize in a different way. But we know that E.D., this is going to be bad language for me, was more serious. E.D. was just incredibly serious about what we got done. So we know that Mrs. Parks, for example, one of the things she had done was she had gone up to see about that rape up in Alabama. She had done that. We know that when Mrs. Parks refused to give up her seat, we know that it had nothing to do with her being tired. We knew things like that. But we knew that child, whose name is escaping me right now, Claudette Colvin, had refused to give up her seat and had been arrested. Claudette was pregnant, and nobody wanted to be embarrassed.
And she was 15 years old.
Yeah, but she was pregnant. That was the
Pregnant
problem.
15.
And everybody was like, oh, we'll be embarrassed because they will say. You have to wonder, for the writer in the room, what would have happened if we had followed through on Miss Colvin and then Mrs. Parks and not wondered about who gave a damn whether she was pregnant or not, because her pregnancy had nothing to do with the fact that she had a right to that seat. You see what I'm saying? Thank you. And I'm tired of, that's what I'm trying. We have to sort of, I'm doing this poorly and I don't mean to, but we have to quit trying to be pleasing to people that no matter what we do are going to still dislike us. It's that simple. It's true. And it bothered me, and it bothers me, and I won't be here. I said that to my class too. I know I won't, and I'm sorry that I won't. Because we have to look at, why did Barack Obama think that his job was to please the people who didn't care, who not only didn't care, who disliked him, instead of building up the people who had taken him forward? He should have done more with the black community, more with the young people. He should have. And I'm sorry if he should have, because anything that he did that the white people are saying, oh, he was a great guy, it didn't do us any good. So when we turn around and we need a Hillary Clinton as opposed to this fool we got, we didn't go out, nobody said, oh yeah, Barack is now asking us to do something. Where was he 8 years ago? Where was he in determining we are black people and who we stand for is good? I don't know if I'm making sense, but it had to be. So somebody in this room has a child, has a grandchild, who's going to write a history that's going to find out what the hell has been going on, that for 8 years we had a black man in the White House, and what we ended up with is a Nazi.
And you've been very candid about your disappointment in the Obama presidency, and you even said before we were talking, you said you rejected an invitation to the White House. Could you talk a little bit about that decision?
I only had one. I only got invited to the White House once while they were there, but I didn't go, and I don't know why. I didn't go. Michelle invited me, and I didn't go. And I'm just glad that I didn't. I don't know what told me to say no, because I seldom say no, but I just didn't go. And my people said, "Oh, you'd be at the White House." And I thought, what would I do at the White House? They don't need a poem. I don't sing or dance. What would I do? No, what would I do? And I just couldn't see me acting like something was right, because something has not been right. And not that anybody gave a damn what a minor poet in America thinks. That nobody cared. I don't ever fool myself about that. I was laughing. I tell you, if he had nominated Baldwin, maybe I would have gone or something. But that nobody listens to me, so why should I pretend that they do? And recently, somebody, all of the magazines, by the way, and I'm sure you'll start getting them. All of the magazines did a thing on what would you tell the president, the new president. And you got to be kidding. So they asked people like me, what would you tell the president, now? And my answer was, to read the Constitution. But he's not, and nothing else that I'm going to say. You think Trump listens to me? So why should I try to say anything else other than deal with the Constitution? I did say he should probably look at Miss Manners just so he could, come across a little better. But these people don't listen to me, so why should I pretend they do? And I'm glad I didn't go to the White House. And maybe one day I'll be invited to the White House. I've never been. I don't think that I've missed anything. But more, to be very honest, I don't think the White House has missed anything by me not being there. I'd be a fool to think, well, damn it, they're going to miss me. They're not going to miss me. And I'd be a fool to think that I have added something. And whatever my voice means, it's still mine.
And so we were talking a little bit before, and this is to that point about how you think of legacy and how you have lived a long and what I can tell you've lived a very successful life, and have impacted many people and many people in this room with your work. And I'm curious in what way, sort of reflecting back on your life as a writer, on your life as an activist, as your life as a person, as a friend. In what ways do you think you were correct in your assessment of how you were sort of the decisions you made and navigating your professional career and your personal career, as compared to what you may have thought in that moment? I guess, so for so many young writers and so many people, a lot of us are caught up in thinking about how can we, make the biggest impact. And I don't think, and for me, part of what I've been trying to step back from, especially in the midst of this moment, is to be more precise and to sort of recalibrate the definition of what impact is and what impact looks like, and to move away from the institutional affiliations or the sort of arbitrary social capital and the prizes and accolades and these things, and to think about the one's life project more broadly than that. And I'm curious how you think about that now, having done so many things.
Oh, thanks. No, for somebody like me, first of all, I was a part of the SNCC generation. I am a Fisk University graduate finally, and I say finally because I got kicked out. It ended up John Lewis and I, by the way, John for a much better reason than I did. Graduated at the same time, so John and I held hands and walked down the aisle together. It was very nice, but he was doing real work, and at that point I was fooling around. And I know that probably if whenever my life story is written, somebody can say, "Oh, she made a mistake doing this, that, and the other." I just tried to live my life, and I just tried to tell the truth as I saw it, and I try to write what I believe in. I don't reread my work, and I always urge writers, don't spend too much time rereading your work, or you'll repeat your work. And what you want to do is to learn something and go forward. And I'll tell you something I hope won't make me cry, because I cried the first time I talked about it. But I was at the African American Museum, which was really wonderful. And I was invited, before, of course, we were there as a part of the legacy thing. I was invited for the hard hat a long time ago. And then when it finally opened, I went with a couple of people. And it was really, and I hadn't thought about it. And I saw my friend Anthony, and he said, who runs a bookstore in Washington, you know him, yeah. And he said, "Oh, it was a great shot of you." And I hadn't thought of myself as being, that's something that, I have a lawyer, and so permission to have pictures and words and things, that I don't handle things like that. I have someone who handles it. And so I hadn't thought about it. And I was walking around, well, I just shouldn't have, but it was like on C3, And I was walking around, and there's a note, a quotation by Ronnie Birch, and there's a quotation, Lonnie Birch, and there's a quotation from Barack, and then there's a quotation from me. And that surprised me. And so, I shouldn't be surprised at things like that because I've been around a long time, but I was surprised and I was pleased and I kind of smiled. But then I went around again and there were pictures and it was of me and I had afro and stuff. And I automatically, and I didn't mean to, looked over my shoulder to look for my grandmother. And I just wanted to say to her, I did a good job. I did my job. And that's the truth. That's the truth. Thank you. And I didn't realize I was doing that's all I wanted to do with this life is my job. And I think at 73 I've done it. So I think whatever else it is and what else I learn and whatever else if my grandmother could be here, and grandmother meant so much to me, I think she would be proud of me. And that's what mattered to me. That's what mattered.
And I want to give us time to open it up for questions from the audience. So I think that we have a microphone that's going to come around. If people have questions, obviously. Yeah, no, we appreciate you sharing.
Stop being sentimental.
How you doing, Mr. Giovanni? I love your work, by the way. I have a couple questions, but I'm gonna ask one. The grind of your first book, Black Feelings, Black Talk. How was it, being that there wasn't any social media to help catapult the content to the consumer? You getting a loan for that and having to work that. Like, what was that like?
So you can't think like, and we're back to you can't think like that. And I'm always laughing, saying, I could have stood on the corner. But Black Feeling, Black Talk, because I published it myself. So I formed a little company. I mentioned, I threw a name out that you all didn't know, you do. Gloria Haffer was a friend of my mother's, and she decided to go to law school. And I was trying to start a writing career. So Mommy said to me, you ought to ask Gloria. And so I asked Gloria, what did I need to do? And Gloria said, you need to form a foundation, which I did. I did what Gloria said, and she handles all of that. I don't have to do anything like that. But that was just a question of going to find someone, not just. I lived in New York, so it was a question of finding a publisher or a printer. And in the village, there were printers in the village, and I found, it was a black guy, he's a wonderful young man. And I said, how many books can I get for how much dollars? And at that point, I could get 100 books for, $150, one of those kind of things. And I thought, okay, so all I have to do is collect the $100. And you can sell 100 any damn thing. If you sit here and tell me you can't sell 100, something's wrong with you. So I did that, but that's the truth. But what was wonderful, my mother, whom I do truly adore, grandmother just meant the world to me, but my mother was a jazz fan. And I wrote my second book because I was, how you're a writer and you just write the second book. And it's Black Judgment, Judge-Ment, okay? And I wrote that and I thought, I've got something here. Why don't I have some fun with it? Because all you can do is go wrong. My mother being a jazz fan, Birdland is in New York. So I went down to Birdland. There was what was his name now? Oh, Lord, my mind. His mind is gone. But the guy who owned, I'll think of it eventually, the guy who owned Birdland, he's a crook, he was a gangster. And I went down and met, I can see his face. And I met him, and I said, I'd like to have a book party on Sunday because the things are closed on Sunday in New York. All the nightclubs are closed. And he said, it'll cost you $500. Well, I didn't have, I will think of his name eventually. And I said, but what's the alternative? And he's sitting there, we're just talking. I guess nobody ever went down to say, I want Birdland for free. And he said, he said, I tell you what, Giovanni, you give me 100 people on Sunday because to have a book party would open up his bar so he'd make money. He said, you give me Harold Logan. You can give Googling. So Mr. Logan said, bring me 100 people and you can have it for free. 99 people and you'll owe me $500. So I thought, well, okay, Mr. Logan, that's a good deal. We shook hands. And then I thought, oh my God, I just shook hands with a gang. This man murders people. That's the truth. But WWRL, WLIC, we had 3 radio shows. So I started going around, I started asking, can I talk about black judgment, black judgment? So I wanted my mother to come because I thought having a book party in Birdland, she would enjoy. You know, it would be great for mommy. So she came too. I had Novella Nelson, Amanda Ambrose, Morgan Freeman was my next door neighbor. So I had some nice people who were reading for me. And on Sunday afternoon, people started lining up. Birdland at that point was on Broadway, and people started coming. And New York Times was here. Birdland is here, and New York Times was there. People started coming, and then it turned that way. So the Times sent a reporter downstairs because all they were seeing was people. And they said, what's going on? And the people said, black judgment is coming. So you know what that's, I mean, it can. And so the reporter finally came over and said to me, I'm looking for Nikki Giovanni. Do you know where he is? And I'm Nikki Giovanni. He said, no, I'm looking for Nick Giovanni. And so he finally realized that I'm who he's looking for. And I was saying, we're a book party. Well, what it was, we ended up doing, of course, we got Harold's people in, by the way, and that was really good. And I was really glad about the 100 people. But we got more than that. But what we got was the second New York Times is the first news front, and then that second news front, and we got the second news front, which is going to do 2 things. A lot of other writers didn't like the fact that I had second news front because they ran ego tripping. And there's going to be some, I guess the term is going to be jealousy, but I'm not going to think about that because I wasn't doing, I just wasn't going to deal with it. I was glad to have it. And you say, how did I help my career? That is going to put my career in another place. And I had, that's how I got Vicki. And, well, you know, Vicki Lucas worked for Benny King, and she was Benny King's publicist. And so Vicki became a fan and a friend. And she said, you know, you're going to need help with speaking. And so she helped me get that. And so I've always run like a 3-person, Vicki's gone too now, but I've always had like a 3-person office, and that's how it started. So I just run a very small group. Yeah, that's how it happened. It was great, yeah. By the way, Mr. Logan was shot and killed. Yeah, well, he was a gangster, but I was sorry he was shot and killed because, one, he was great to work. He's got Birdland, and other writers should have taken advantage of the fact that on Sunday, if you talk to Mr. Logan, you could get something done. Because you just can't keep saying, I'm not going to do anything with somebody. You have to try to figure out who can help, and you have to ask, because all they can say is no. And you've heard that before. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Ooh, okay. I'm a little nervous because I usually ask questions and stuff like this. And I was like, I'm not going to ask, but I got to ask. Whew, okay. I'm 24, and I guess I'm a little concerned about what to do with the rest of my life. I'm from Baton Rouge, and I guess it's like I feel compelled to stay home and teach because the education system is in a state of despair, and someone has to do it. But my soul isn't in it. I want to write, and I want to do other things, and I feel like I deserve to see the world, and I deserve to get on hot air balloons and stuff like that. I think someone should teach, but I want to write. So I guess my question is, at what point do you do what you want to do, and at what point do you owe the world? And at what age does that lay on top of each other? I don't.
You're definitely asking the wrong person.
Okay. Well, then, and I don't want to do this. I don't want to do a two-question thing because that's not fair to everybody else. Um, I may have found someone that I think I could spend the rest of my life with, and we would talk. And it's almost too lovely for me to accept. It's okay to accept that at 24, right?
Well, good luck, and I hope you're happy. I mean, good luck. I can't give advice like that. You want to give advice?
But maybe you could speak quickly to her first point about because you've been teaching at Virginia Tech for 25 years now,
30 years.
30 years now. Maybe you could speak to the relationship between your teaching and your writing and
Well,
what.
I never wanted a job, and so I didn't, and so I didn't have one. I was cute when I was little, and so I knew that I would never be hungry, and I would never. Some things you have to face. There's always going to be somebody to take care of you, so you have to figure out how you want to. I mean, sincerely, and how much you want to put into it. Tech recruited me, and I was married. There's a poem in my new book that I like, and it's not a good poem. Let me share that with you. But it's called "I Married My Mother." And when my father had a stroke, I moved back home, and I did. I married mommy, and essentially I took over because she needed help. And so there was no point. Don't you hate it when something goes wrong that is seriously wrong, like your father has a stroke, and your older sister calls and says, "Call me if you need help." What kind of sense that you know damn well she needed help? So I packed up my dog and my son, and we went to Cincinnati, and we bought a house. We did a lot of things that had to be done. But I said to mommy, when this, I don't want to say opportunity, but it made sense to me. When Tech recruited me, I said to mommy, why don't we move to Virginia? Because it was time for us to do something. And mommy wanted to move too, so we moved to Virginia. And then she's very close to her middle sister, so her middle sister moved. And all of a sudden, again, everybody was happy. My older sister ended up moving. I'm still working on understanding my older sister. But you know that you needed something, and you know that mommy needed something. And the one thing I wanted mommy to do, and I think I competed with my father. That's what I'm trying to understand. I think that my father was alcoholic and he was abusive. And I think I competed with my father, to say to my mother, you don't have to be abused. That it's not right that every Saturday night somebody fusses with you or somebody hits you. I think I had that issue. And so when Gus died, I was glad because it let me become the man of the house, as it were, and it let mommy be freer, as it were. And a couple of things, I was laughing. Maya Angelou, who was her friend, and Maya was a lot of fun too. Maya was not as good a cook as she thought, but she was pretty good. She wasn't. She wasn't. If she was here, she would take exception to that. But the first time we met, and I say we because mommy was with me, we met Maya. We were at Mount Holyoke. Maya's like 6 feet tall. Mommy's 4'11". And Maya had on a fur coat, a mink. And Catherine Graham, Kay Graham was there, and she had on a mink. Everybody had on a mink. I've never been into clothes. I think I look nice today, but I'm not into clothes like that. But my mother didn't have a mink. And I thought, when I go home, if the plane doesn't fall, my mother's going to have a mink. We are never going to walk in the house into any place with those bitches again, and she don't have a and she don't have a mink. That's the truth. And I mean no disrespect, but she was gone. So we did that. That next week, I went and picked out the furs so my mother could have a mink. Maya was always nice to my mother, always. And every time she saw my mother, a lot of times that I wasn't with her. And Maya was always nice to mommy. And so, these are just the kind of things that you want to embrace. These are the things that are important to you. And the rest of the things, it's just a strange answer. The rest of the things sort of don't matter. All you're trying to do is be happy. And you deserve that, don't you think? All you're trying to do. And I was close to mommy. Let's say grandmother meant the world to me, and grandmother's very different. I know that I'm going to not probably, I mean, chances are 99% when I die, I'm definitely going to hell. But I am going to, but I'm going to get a day pass to heaven. I am. Because I want to talk to my grandmother, because I did. I loved her so much. And all we're trying to do is make it through. Does that make sense? That's all we're trying to do. I don't know if that made sense or not. Okay, good. I'll shut up. That's it.
Oh.
That's it.
Hi, Nikki.
Hey.
Can I call you Nikki?
Oh, yes, my name. Oh, I know what happened. You asked me about Virginia Tech. Mommy and I agreed to go to Virginia Tech.
And that's how you pay for the name.
Oh, no. No, we didn't go to Virginia Tech 30 years ago. And I was grown. We went to Virginia Tech as the last move. And I bought her a house, and I bought her a Cadillac because we're black women, and she wanted I did. And my Aunt Ann came, but neither Mommy nor Ann at the time we went to Tech could drive. They needed to not be driving. And I wanted them, you talk about driving Miss Daisy, I wanted them to hire a driver, and they wouldn't listen to me. But we lived in Tech for about 10 years. My sister came and lived there. And it was just so wonderful to have moved the family from Ohio, which had a lot of, which had a lot of unhappy memories. And we moved to Virginia, which had a lot of good memories. So I became a good husband. Now, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Kay Alexandra. Pleased to meet you. I'm glad I'm not meeting you in Mississippi because I was definitely angry then. You say you're not a friendly person, and I definitely can see that. But in terms of your colleagueship or your professionalism, what was your criteria for friendship with James Baldwin? What was his criteria for friendship with you, and how does that translate into your life now?
I really think that Jimmy and I gave each other space, but as I say again, I give space to everybody. And I know a lot of writers. You know, Toni Morrison's son Slade died, I think about 5 years ago now. And when Slade died, Maya was living just 2 hours from me. And I drove down to see Maya to say, what should we do? Because Maya and I at that point were working together. I mean, we became friends too. And we were trying to decide what to do. We decided that we would invite, and you have to give me an address and I'll send you that program. We decided what we should do is invite the writers to come and read their favorite part of Toni Morrison. We just thought nothing's going to take the place of your son, or your child. We know that, but we thought it'd be a way of letting her know. We were going to have it at Wake Forest, but Maya, which we didn't know was dying, I didn't know was dying. Maybe I should have paid more attention. And so Maya called me one day and said, can you come down? And it's not the way, it was something, and it was like, yeah. And I always got tickets going down there because you make that turn to go to 40 and you always get a ticket, so I did. And I went down and I knew that she was not feeling well. And she said, I don't think I can handle it. I think it's more than I can handle. And I said, Maya, what do you want me to do with that? Just what do you want me to do? She said, would you do it at Virginia Tech? And I said, Maya, you got to be kidding. We would love to have it. How can we make sure that you're there? Well, she has this bus that she had. So I need to learn to speak to her. And she had the bus. And so she was going to be okay. I talked to my president, Dr. Steger, at that point when I got back, and he agreed to send his plane to pick up Toni. And Toni drinks vodka. And so the one thing that I knew, Maya drank scotch. So I don't drink, so I had to deal with what's the best. And I found out what the best scotch was, and we sent it down to Maya so that she would have that on the way up. And I said, what's the best vodka? And we sent that, and I sent Jenny to pick up Toni because I don't fly, I'm not a good flyer. And so I knew that if I flew up with her to fly back with her, it would be like having nobody. And so it would. But Jenny drinks and talks, and so they drank and talked all the way back.
And that's your assistant, for clarification.
That's my person. And so what we did was we invited everybody that we actually knew. let a net out, and all of the writers came. So when you looked around, everybody who wrote anything came, and they read for Toni. And I'm sitting here being sentimental, but to sit with Toni Morrison and to hold her hand, and to have tears fall from her eyes. And she said on that stage, "If nothing ever happens to me in my public life again, this does it for me." Maya and I could not have been happier. And as you know, Maya died a couple of months later. And so it was just so meaningful that we could do that. You're talking about friendship. Well, you give people, I know, you give people room, but there's some things, when Slade died, we thought we should embrace. And so otherwise, I'm not going to bother you. The only other person I bother really is Mary Evans, and Mary's 94, and I'm worried about her because she lives in Indianapolis, but her nephew has moved in with her. But and I say bother, I will call Mary Evans to gossip, to say what's going on. But you try not to bother people. You just try to let them. You ask about friendship. You just try to let them, yeah. And being a friend of, and I loved her so much too, being a friend of Rosa Parks, but we never would have discussed, and we never did, what did it feel like to, not give up your seat? I mean, what kind of fool would I be? I'm sitting there, I'm drinking coffee. You know what I did say to her, though? When I can share this, I think. She was a tea drinker, I'm a coffee drinker, and we were sitting there talking. I said, Miss Parks, and mostly I called her Miss Parks, Miss Parks, I said, it's amazing when I think of your life, I can only think of one mistake that you made. And Rosa Parks is probably the coolest person you ever know. I mean, she was just a cool person. And I could see that her face dropped a little bit, so I was to myself smiling. And I was. And she went one of those things, and what would that be, baby? I said, you went AKA.
Well played, Nikki. Well played.
She should have been a Delta. Ooh.
If I may, Ms. Giovanni, it's a technical question, so I won't be surprised if you don't know the answer. When Baldwin attacked the Bandung Conference and Richard Wright, many years later, I think, in his book Soul on Ice, Eldridge Cleaver wrote a scathing essay attacking Baldwin. Do you know if Baldwin ever got a chance to read that essay?
Oh, I'm sure he did. He read everything.
Do you know if he had a reaction to it?
Not with me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Do you know?
I don't know,
I
but
think
for
one of the critics
context,
would
for
know.
people who don't, for Eldridge Cleaver was a member of the Black Panthers and spent some time in prison and wrote what ended up becoming a very famous prison memoir that is now we look at through the lens of something being having questionable politics with regard to the way it talked about gender, the way it talked about homosexuality, and he was not a fan of James Baldwin at all, and made that very clear in this essay that he wrote. And so that's helpful context for people.
I was not an Eldridge fan, and so I answered as best I don't know. I don't know anybody famous, with the possible exception of Lena Horne, to whom I'm actually distant kin, that we could talk about what was stage like and what do you remember when you sang, because you could talk to Lena. Well, my family is from Albany, Georgia, and the Kings married the Horn. I mean, it's one of those things that go around. So Lena and I were distant cousins, and so we talked about public life. We could laugh. We could laugh and say, well, what was that like being on stage, that fool doing that? But most of the famous people that I knew, we just didn't discuss it just wasn't going to come up, because it's no point in having me as a friend if you have to treat me like I'm, a reporter or anything else. One of the things you like about your friends, and I feel the same way, is that you don't have to discuss your life. You don't have to go back. So I don't know what Jimmy thought about it. And the person who would know, actually, and you'll run into him, he's still here, of course, is David, his brother. David's still here. I saw David recently. And David would know a lot more about Jimmy's reactions to some of these things than somebody like me, because he just wouldn't, it's not going to come up. We got the book, and I was incredibly pleased. And as I said, I haven't read the book, so I don't know if I would be pleased or embarrassed right now. But I was too young, and to read it now, I'd have to go through some other, So one day I will, but not soon.
It's great that you're here with us on the 61st anniversary of Rosa Parks' historic protests. I think we're very fortunate here in New Orleans to be in your company. My name is Happy Johnson, and I had a chance to meet you 6 years ago at Loyola University, and I gave you a copy of my book. My children's book is called The Adventures of Happy and Big Wanda, and the edition that I gave you was the 9th edition. I like to think it was the best version of it. And about 6 months later, you wrote me a letter, and I have it. It's framed here. And you encouraged me to continue to keep writing. And I just wanted to thank you for this letter, because the encouragement and just the amazing feeling that it had for me, encouraged me to write more. And so now I have 4 children's books, and the book that you reviewed sold out. And so I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart to take time to, My 2 favorite poems are, one is Ego Tripping, and then the other one is Communication. And you have that in the 1973 album called Lake, Like a Ripple on a Pond. And the album that you did with the New York Community Choir, I was just curious, since it was so close to, your dialogue with James Baldwin. That was in 71. The album was in 73. It was so innovative that you did the spoken word with gospel music. I was just curious if you could tell us about how that came about. I've tried to find, information about how you and Mr. I think it was Biggs or Diggs got together. He was the choir director, but I would love to hear how Like a Ripple on a Pond came together.
Yeah, Ripple was the second one. Again, now we're back to Ellis Hazlett, because when we finished what we were doing and we got that, Ellis was saying, "What would you like to do?" And I'm always thinking of something. I mean, if I sit here long enough, I could think of something to do. And I said, boy, I would really love, because I love gospel music, and my grandmother's Baptist. And my mother actually ended up in AME church, but grandmother was Baptist. And I grew up with gospel music, with the spirituals. And I said, boy, I'd really love to do a show with the spirituals, with our poetry and spirituals. But I don't know, which I didn't in New York, any director, any choirs. And Ellis knew everybody. He said, "Oh, I know a choir director. I'll take you up and I'll introduce you." And so we did. We went up to Harlem, and I met the New York Community Choir. And now, of course, what I have to have is where to have it. Well, like any New Yorker, I want to work in Lincoln Center, right? Because it's there. So all they can say in Lincoln Center is, "Are you crazy?" And so I went down, Patrick McGinnis, who just retired. And I went down, made an appointment with Patrick, and said, "I'd really love to have a show here, and I'd like to, actually, I'd like with the choir and me doing the poetry, what do I need to do to get Lincoln Center?" And Lincoln Center is incredibly expensive. So we finally got it down to $1,500. So I figured, as I say, you stand on any corner and get $1,500. So we started with that. Okay, we got that. Then I thought, well, if we're going to do it, why not record it? And this is where I got screwed, but one gets screwed in that business, and I learned that early. And so between Motown and something called Right On Records, I had a thing. I knew Motown. I knew I couldn't handle Berry Gordy because he had screwed everybody. So it's a business. And so I ended up with Right On Records, and I ended up with a record, Truth Is On Its Way. What I had to do in order to make my $1,500 was to sell out. So the best way to sell out is Aretha Franklin. So I called Aretha. And why not? All she can say is no. And she's a really nice person, but Aretha had a lot on her at that time. I've always loved Aretha. If she was sitting, we're friends, but we don't hang out. And she couldn't do it. But she's good. She's close to Wilson. Wilson Pickett. So I called Pickett. And Pickett, is crazy. I love Pickett so much. And he was like, I'll be there. And he was. And so when I could say me, because I'm not big enough to pull Lincoln Center, I'm not a fool. But I had Pickett now and the New York Community Choir. Pickett started, I'll never forget it. Of all of the things that happened to my brain. And Pickett comes on stage, I wish Aretha Franklin would be here. I'm sure Aretha was just mad at him forever for that. And it was it was great, but we sold out. And once we sold out, we had covered everything that had to be covered. And I could pay my people. I didn't make anything off of it, but you can't always I didn't need to. What I needed to do was to cover my people. So Truth Is On Its Way opened up a whole thing. I was laughing with Gloria Happer, who is my lawyer, to say, how in the world can we sue Hamilton? And she said, Nikki, you can't sue Hamilton. I said, why can't I sue Hamilton? Because nobody thought of doing a hip-hop opera until I did Truth Is On Its Way. That's the truth. And I want my share of that. It sold out for 2 years, and I know that boy didn't know anything about it until we started doing it. So that's how we got to that. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I just keep trying to think of things to do, and I've been very fortunate. They've been working. I really like Negroes, and so that's I do, and I like to show us off, and so I'm always looking for how can I show something different. And so when I pass, they're going to go all the way back, and we'll go back to recreation, and then we'll go over to Black Judgment. Then you'll begin to see, it will be seen how some of the effect I had on show business, not just what I write, because I think I'm a good writer. And so when I look at it, there's some poems that are really lousy, but if you're a poet, you go write a bad poem. If you don't write a bad poem, something else is wrong. But I think the shows I have thought of and put together have been innovative, and other people have been able to use that, and other people have taken that to take the next step. And so I'm very proud of the way I think about Black people. I shouldn't say Negro. You know what I mean? And how we present ourselves, and where, because you always want a big stage. If you can get a bigger stage, then you want. We're here in New Orleans, so there's stages in New Orleans that somebody who is here is doing something that can think about doing. I don't know New Orleans well enough to, you see what I'm saying? But there are things that are going on that you say, oh, I should try to do this. Now, you won't make any money off of it, because if you have to add your fee in, it's going to make it more than you can handle. But you can get people to do things with you. All of my shows are free, by the way. I was saying, the thing we did with Toni Morrison, if I had put Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou on stage, which I did, and had a ticket with a fee on it, do you know what would have happened to all of us? We would have all fought. The writers who came in would say, well, how come I didn't get paid? It would have just been ugly. So the thing you do is that nobody got paid. Then everybody was happy. And you have to think about, things like that. Because to put just the two of them on stage, you're looking at $100 ticket or more. Just to say, come and see Maya and Toni, you're looking at a serious ticket. So if we do that and we said, oh, and by the way, Morgan Freeman's coming. Do you see what's going on? You can't put money on that. So you take money off you have to know when to charge and when not to charge. And you can't charge when you're bringing that kind of group together. You bring them together, you feed them. You must always have really, really good food, and you must always have really, really good alcohol, because they all drink. No, you must. You really must. These are just, you have to. And everything else will work out. Is it time for you to kick me off stage?
It's our last question.
No, that's fine.
Nikki, thanks for coming. I really appreciate you being here. My name is Hillary Davis, and I've been your personal chair section every time you mention Fisk. Because I am a Fisk alum. So I wanted to ask you, I know I have my favorite memories of Fisk, but what are some of yours, your most precious memories of Fisk, if you can share?
Oh, that's going to be hard too, but my grandfather was at Fisk University, 1905, and I met the Queen Elizabeth. That's a long story, and I won't carry you through it, but she asked to meet me because, I didn't call her queen, right? And it's one of those, her people call my people, and my people knew to say yes. They didn't have to ask that. And I had to go over to Richmond because she asked to meet me. And I was trying to, I looked good, by the way. And no, because there's only one Queen Elizabeth. I've only met two queens in my life. One is Queen Juanita of Kono, Ghana, and Elizabeth of England. And they take you and they introduce, Madame, this is, Nikki Giovanni. And I said, Madame, it's a pleasure. And she said, oh, it's a pleasure, And I said, we have something in common. Because, if you're going to meet the queen, you may as well say something to get her attention. And she said, oh. And I said, your grandmother, Queen Victoria, invited what became the Jubilee Singers, the Fisk Singers, to come to sing for her, and she awarded them 50,000 pounds, and they built Jubilee Hall, and they became the Jubilee Singers, and that's it. And she's, oh, because she didn't know anything about her part of the Black history. What I would like is for the Jubilees to go and sing for Elizabeth. That would be, I would love to have that. Speaking of shows I wish I could put on, I would love to have that happen in remembrance of what is done. I doubt that is. And I think that Fisk should become an all-girls school. It should become a women's school because that's another discussion too. But Vanderbilt, as you know, is just taking over. And soon Vanderbilt is going to have all of our land, as you know. And so I'm just looking forward. I was glad I got kicked out of school because Dean Cheatham, and she was probably right, but in terms of it was a Thanksgiving actually. And I went home my first Thanksgiving. I was an early entrant, and I had a ride home, home being Knoxville, to see my grandparents. And I'm glad I did because my grandfather died 3 months later. And I had a ride home, and I hadn't asked, you were talking about, I hadn't asked Dean Cheatham if I could go home because I didn't see that I should have to ask anybody if I could do something. I just failed to understand that one. So I went home, and when I came back, she was like, Miss Giovanni, you didn't have permission to go home. And I was like, Dean Cheatham, I don't need permission to go see my grandma. I just not something we didn't understand each other. And so ultimately I got, not ultimately, but I got kicked out. And I saw her last year. And this woman came up to me and she said, I don't think you know who I am. And I'm not friendly, but I'm nice. And I was like, oh. That's the truth. And she said, I'm Dean Cheatham. And I said, oh, well, probably the best thing that happened to me was that you kicked me out, because that made me have to think what I want to do for myself and how I wanted to do it. And ultimately, I did go back. I was out of school for a year. I did go back to Fisk, and I did graduate. So everything, I don't think there are mistakes in life. I think that they're all lessons. And you've learned 1 and 1 is not 3, but you've learned that that's not you didn't make a mistake. You learned that 1 and 1 is not 3. And so that's the way I look at it. So I'm interested in what Fisk is going to do. We just had a new president, and I talked to Angie Ali a lot. And so Fisk has a lot. We have historic buildings that have to stay up there, thank God. And I worry about how we're being engulfed. But I like Vandy, and I wish that Fisk and Vandy could make a deal, because Fisk has the best singers in the world. And if we took the music school from Vandy and the sociology school because of W.B. Du Bois, if we took those 2 schools and put them in Fisk and let Fisk be the Fisk school of Vanderbilt University, we could survive. Because right now, as you know, Fisk is in incredible trouble because it's a money situation. This is America, and it's a money situation. So I don't know what we're going to do. I'm proud to be a Fisk graduate, and I wish us well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for